ATOTO has sent me an A6PF Android head unit to install in my 2012 Corolla, so that's what we're going to look at in today's video. If you're going to install one of these units yourself, make sure that you follow all the instructions that come with the kit and any accessories that you buy, and it's always a good idea to get some help from a professional also. Before we get started with the installation, let's take a look at what comes in the ATOTO kit. First, of course, is the head unit itself. This is the 9-inch screen and the main body of the radio that fits inside the opening where the factory radio goes is here. Up next, we have a couple of different options for faceplates here. Over here on the right are installation, user manuals, warranty information, and quick install and start guides. And next up here, we have the wiring kit that comes with the radio. There are several wiring harnesses, USB cables, adapters for amplifiers and video in and out. We've got a GPS antenna here, foam strips, some more wiring here. We've got an external microphone here. We've got a bag of screws. We've got a couple of modules here. These are line out converters. And we've got some brackets here. Now, ATOTO also sent me a backup camera to use with this system. There's a video cable inside. And then we have the camera itself and this bracket, which is designed to mount sort of behind the license plate. Now, the nice thing about these ATOTO kits is that all the wires are clearly labeled with these little tags, so you know what they're for and where they're supposed to be connected. And there's also pretty good instructions on how to mount the radio and wire everything up inside the supplied manuals. ATOTO includes quite a bit with their kit, but they don't include the wiring harnesses that you might need to connect up to their vehicle. Now, if you're going to be installing something like this in your car, make sure you do the research and order the right parts for your vehicle, but I'll leave links to these down in the description below in case you want to check them out. This kit here will connect up the ATOTO main harness to the plugs inside the dashboard on my car. I should be able to use this wiring harness to connect up to the ATOTO wires and enable my steering wheel controls on the Corolla. And then lastly, I needed to order an antenna adapter since the back of the ATOTO unit has what I'll call sort of a standard antenna port, whereas my Toyota has sort of this custom arrangement here. So inside the car, here's a look at the stock radio. To get this thing out of here, all I have to do is start pulling off these trim panels. These two bottom ones come out first, and then I can use a spudger tool to pop the two top ones off. Now I've got this top bezel out of the way and set aside, I should be able to pull the bezel around the radio out. Now there's two bolts on either side of the radio that need to come out. Now the radio is free and I can pull it forward and disconnect the wires at the back. As I said earlier in the video, if you're working on an installation like this yourself, make sure that you go through everything in the instruction manuals, and it's also handy to have a service manual for your car so you know what's what. Now, I'm not going to go through all the details of what's connected to what, but one thing that I do like to do when I'm setting up a radio like this is I use these bullet connectors, and then they can kind of just unplug and plug easily so that if I do have something wrong, when I'm out at the car, I can just disconnect and reconnect as needed to figure it out. One thing I will mention before we move forward any further is that I'm not so sure that that secondary harness I bought for steering wheel control to work is going to be correct. We'll look at that a little later in the video, but everything else is connected up and ready at least for a first try. So I've got the old factory radio here, and I'm going to pull these brackets off the side and reuse them. So now, in order to adapt my factory Toyota bracket to the ATOTO radio, I'm going to install the two extension sides that were included with the ATOTO kit. The extension brackets are stamped R and L, so you put them on the right side of the radio. Now, because this is a universal bracket, it's got tons of little holes in it. So I'm just going to slide this around until I figure out which ones line up with these threaded holes in the base ATOTO bracket. And then I'll use a couple of the small screws included with the kit to screw it on. Now I'll grab my Toyota brackets, which are also stamped R and L, so you get them on the right side of the radio. So I'll drop the bracket on here, and I'll slide it around until I find the best fit between the hole in the bracket and where these dimples go. Now you can see I've got the main holes lined up, but the dimples don't exactly drop into clearance holes. I think we'll still be okay. This should tighten up just fine. So even though the camera has a license plate bracket to kind of mount behind the license plate, I still need to find a way to run the wire inside the trunk. In order to do that, I've removed the license plate and I'm going to drill a hole in the sheet metal here and then fill that up with a grommet to keep it weather sealed. Now, in order to get the wires through the grommet, I need to kind of poke a hole in the middle, and you can kind of see from the factory there's already kind of one started. Now, even though that's a small little hole, I can kind of force these connectors through it one at a time. So with the hole drilled, I can now run my wires in through it and get the grommet installed. Now that that's all set, I can get the plate mounted back on and finish running the wires inside the car. So I'm going to start off by grabbing the end that has the red and yellow connector and the pink and black wire. This is the end that's going to connect up to the camera at the trunk. The other end of the wire is what we're going to fish through to the front of the car and connect up to the head unit. This is the one with the single yellow connector and the pink and red wire. For the camera install, the next thing I need to do is hook up this pink trigger wire to the 12 volts that goes to the backup light. I'm going to use a voltmeter to probe these connections. I'm going to take my positive probe and I'm going to stick that into the end of the connector so it's making contact with the connector contact here. And then I'm going to take my negative one and I'm going to ground it to a ground point on the car. And then I'll read my meter and see where I've got voltage. Hopefully you guys can see the meter. We're looking at 10 volts right there. Now really that should be reading 12 volts, but my battery's a little weak in this car. So what that means is I want to go shut the key off so there's no power here and then tap into this red wire somewhere along here and splice in this pink one. So now you can see I've got the trigger wire spliced into the red wire for the backup light. So every time this backup light comes on, it's going to trigger the camera to turn on. And then the ground wire for the camera is just bolted up here on this stud that holds on the rear applique. I just crimped the ring terminal onto the wire and then found a nut in my scrap bin that I could put over the end of the stud that was already here. Tighten that down and we're good to go. So now as far as the camera wire goes, I ran it from inside the trunk and it's all behind the trim panels down here along this kick panel. But anyway, it comes back under the trim and then up underneath the dash. And I've got it zip tied up here behind the dash, and then it goes up behind and into the radio harness here. I'm just about ready to connect up the radio, but I figured I'd show you guys all the wiring and the bracketry here. First up is the wiring harness. You can see everything's plugged in and ready to go and be plugged into the back of the radio. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I knew I sort of had the wrong harness for the steering wheel controls. This little black connector is what's supposed to connect up to this gray one. Obviously they're different. And when I first looked at this in the house, I didn't realize that this connector is smaller than this white one that's here in my car. So before I plug everything into the radio, I'm actually going to bring the factory bezel kind of back in here. I'm not going to snap it into place just yet. I'm just going to keep it up here loosely so it's out of the way while I connect everything up to the back of the radio. As you can see, everything kind of booted up here and seems to be working. I've tuned to a radio station here and I'm just using it for audio. I want to go into the settings and make sure that all 4 of my speakers are working and working correctly. Left front's going. Right front is good. Right rear is good. Left rear is good. The last thing I want to check right now is to see if the dimmer works when I turn the headlight on. And I don't know if you guys could see, it's fully sunny out here today, but when I put the headlights on, this thing did dim. Now, I originally thought that I was going to have a clearance issue with this larger screen and these bolts on the side, but turns out I don't. So now, with this bracket moved this way a little bit, everything fits just fine, and I can reinstall the 2 little screws on each side that hold the radio to the bracket. So the installation is now complete. The only thing really left to do is route this GPS wire somewhere better than I've got it now. But I want to get this video wrapped up for you guys, so I'm going to leave this as it is for now. One last thing I need to check before I call this installation done is to put the car in reverse and make sure the backup camera is working. And as you can see, it is. Now that I know everything's working, I can remove this protective plastic wrap and we can take a look at how this thing works. First, let's take a look at the boot up time. Got the key on, and you can see that the radio comes on within 2 or 3 seconds. So pretty fast boot. This radio is Android based, and what that means is it works kind of like a cell phone or a tablet. Now it's got some pre-configured apps on here to work with things like the tuner and Bluetooth and whatnot, but you can go over to the Google Play Store and download and install anything that would run on an Android on here as well. You just have to have a Wi-Fi or internet connection in order to do that. There's already a few common apps loaded on here like Chrome, YouTube, Google Maps, and those will all work as long as you have an internet connection. And you can do that either through a traditional Wi-Fi in your garage maybe, or you can tether this thing to a smartphone and drive around. It doesn't have its own capability to have a SIM card or anything like that in it. So now let's take a look at a few things that are sort of unique to this ATOTO radio that you wouldn't have on a normal Android device. The first of those is the radio tuner. I get to that by pushing the purple button, and you can see right now I'm in AM mode. The radio does receive AM and FM, and you can toggle by clicking the band button. There are several band registers for AM and FM and presets that you can set along the bottom. If you go into settings, you can play with the sensitivity of the tuner as well. So if you're in a fringe area like me, you can turn the sensitivity up, or if you're in the city, you can turn it down to reduce overloading. And down here, there's even a selection for the region you're in, so the tuner tunes in the right frequency range and increments. Another thing that's sort of preloaded on here in custom is the equalizer. And you can see I've already kind of played with it from default, but you can kind of draw your own sound pattern by just clicking and dragging your finger around, depending on how you want your radio to sound. And then as we already saw, you can go into the sound field and you can adjust kind of the bias between the speakers, whether you want it in the center or driver centric. There are some sort of quick buttons over here if you want to use those, or you can just put it in the center. You can even do some custom things like delaying the signal to each of the speakers so that you can get kind of that spatial sound, or you can go into the stereo enhancer and play with those controls. There is a bass boost on this, which I've got turned off. We'll talk about why in a minute. And you can even play with your crossover frequencies if you've got sort of a high-end speaker system in your car. Now, one of the things I'll probably use is Google Maps, and that can be used offline without an internet connection either through your phone or a direct Wi-Fi somewhere. Although you will need an internet connection to initially get it to kind of set up and download data. But if I go in here, you can see right now, I can see the little blue dot here showing me where I am. And as I drive around, the little blue dot will move around. Now again, without an internet connection of some kind, I won't get traffic data and I probably can't create routes and navigate, but I can at least see the map and figure out where I am in real time without using internet data. Now most of the time, I'm probably going to use Android Auto. And right now, my phone actually recognizes the ATOTO and is asking me if I want to pair to it wirelessly. So it does have that capability. But since this is an older car and I don't have a wireless charging port in here anywhere, I kind of like to use the USB tether to plug into the phone and charge it while I'm using Android Auto. So to get into Android Auto, I do have to click this car link button and it will automatically recognize my phone and connect up. Now that I'm in Android Auto, you can see I'm using Google Maps, but I've got the ability to kind of see traffic patterns and that kind of a thing. And now I have the ability to navigate somewhere if I want to too. Hey Google, navigate to Faneuil Hall, Boston, Massachusetts.
All right, I'm setting your destination to Faneuil Hall in Massachusetts, United States.
Okay, and as you can see, we're ready to navigate. And of course, while I'm navigating, I can switch over and use Pandora or Spotify or anything like that, or I can even go in and use my phone if I want to. And if I do want to go back into the radio and use some other app, I can kind of do that and then go back in and navigation stays active.
Head southeast on West Main Street toward Green Street.
We took a quick look at the backup camera a minute ago, but let's take another look. If I switch into reverse, you can see the radio automatically activates the backup camera and I can back the car up and make sure that I don't hit any obstacles behind me. And if I go back into first gear, camera shuts off and we're back to the map. Now in terms of sound quality, I can't really do a good test with this ATOTO in this car because the speakers in the back were actually chewed up by the mice, and any amount of bass will cause them to rattle. In fact, that's going to be my next project in this car, is to replace those speakers so I have sort of a decent working sound system. But based on the results from the ATOTO that I put in my Suburban over there, the sound quality should be better than the factory unit. Now overall, I think this ATOTO A6PF is a great upgrade for this older Toyota Corolla. I now have the ability to run Android Auto and Google Navigation, and then even have other apps on here like Spotify, Pandora, or even YouTube if I want to. Now at first I was a little skeptical about the 9-inch screen. I was worried that that might be a little bit too big for this dashboard and look kind of funny in the car. But as you can see, it fits the dashboard nicely. It doesn't block any of the controls below or the air vents above. And it really doesn't look out of place, even though this is a 11-year-old car. About the only thing I can complain about is the fact that the screen on this thing has quite a bit of glare during the day when the sun is out. But that's just a nitpick. I really think this is a great upgrade for this car, and I'm going to enjoy having it in here. Now, if you're interested in getting one of these ATOTO units for your car, I'll have some links down below in the video description. And if you're watching this right after the video is released, there may be even some discount codes that you can use to save a few bucks on your purchase. And if you have a few minutes to spare, let me know what you think of the ATOTO down in the comments below. Thanks for watching.